Hello, my name is Tony Martin. I am the program director at the UC Berkeley Center for the Science of Psychedelics, and I'm excited to be here with you today with some of our 2024 recipients of the Flourish Fellowship in Psychedelics in Society and Culture. This brief webinar is to help people who are thinking about applying for the 2025 iteration of this fellowship program to get a little bit more information, meet some of our current fellows, and hopefully support you in the process of determining whether you want to apply and maybe some things you might want to think about. I'm going to get right into it and ask each of our brilliant fellows to briefly tell about yourselves, your project, maybe what inspired you to dive into this specific topic that you ended up submitting a proposal for and being awarded for. Why don't we start off with you, Hillary?
Sure. So my name is Hilary Brenhouse, and the project that this is supporting is called Elastic. It's a magazine of psychedelic art and literature, which means that we'll be publishing art and writing that is immersive, that plays with time and space, that blurs waking and dreaming life, that's daring, that breaks form, that in general conjures the psychedelic experience. And so our first issue is on the theme of dying, and it'll come out in March, which is very exciting. And yeah, I had been thinking about this project for a really long time, mostly because I found that the ways in which we were talking about psychedelic art, or the ways in which psychedelic art sort of manifests in the popular imagination, had become very narrow and sort of cartoonish. Whereas the first psychedelic era was really a time of very radical artistic innovation. Often we think over and over about, jam band music or fluorescent mandalas. And I think that psychedelic art is and really could be such a uh, rich, diverse, and just expansive category. And so the goal here is to demonstrate that. Also, at the same time, we often think about the art of the same few white men. Whereas, the first psychedelic era was really led by artists of color. And I think that here what we're trying to do is publish as diverse a body of work as possible, while really paying tribute to the diversity of art that may be overlooked from that first psychedelic era. So that's what we're doing here. My background is as an editor. I've been working in books and magazines for about 15 years. And I was just really finding that a lot of what I was reading as an editor was kind of blowing my brain open, and reminding me quite a bit of the psychedelic experience in the way that it was doing things like avoiding linear time, playing with time, and just experimenting with form. And so that's how I sort of brought my background in.
Right. Thanks, Hillary. I think hopefully one of the things people will get from this video is just the breadth of the different types of projects and work. And so moving kind of from art and psychedelic art. Hillary, I wonder, Liam, if you might tell us a little bit about yourself and your project.
Of course. So, my name is Liam. I'm a fourth year undergraduate student here at Berkeley. I study anthropology and I'm minoring in Middle Eastern language and culture with a focus on ancient Egypt. Mouthful. Um, but so my project is called Unfurling the Cup of Dreams. A chemical analysis of the Egyptian blue lotus. So, in ancient Egypt, there is a plant that appears almost everywhere in their artwork and architecture. And in very early Egyptology, they just called this the blue lotus. And it was sort of a hypothetical mythological object. And it wasn't until genetic analysis was performed on flower petals found in mummy wrappings that they figured out the blue lotus was a real plant. And they began to put two and two together, and the sort of governing theory is that the blue lotus has psychedelic effects, psychoactive effects. Um, there was, but the literature on this is very spotty. Um, as my research is slowly beginning to find out, there's a lot of things that we thought we knew about the Blue Lotus that we didn't, and a lot of things that we thought we knew that were wrong. Um, My project uses a technique called liquid chromatography mass spectrometry to essentially metabolically profile plant tissue of the blue lotus. And a lot of research prior to our project faced many obstacles. Um, One of those obstacles is the plant is actually endangered. It's going slowly extinct in the Nile Delta due to salinification of the Nile because of the dam construction. Um, it used to be endemic to the sort of East Mediterranean region, but it's gone completely extinct there. So my project is really fed by this very unique opportunity that UC Berkeley is the only university in the entire United States to have a living specimen of the blue lotus. So while it's with us, we're trying to work with it as much as we can, not only to try and figure out what's actually in there and really metabolically profile this thing so we can know more about what psychoactive agents are present in there, but also figure out how ancient peoples could have used this plant. And there has been a resurgence in its consumption. The plant is often infused into vaping products. It's you can buy dried blue lotus extracts on Etsy, on Amazon. You could get it 2-dayed on Amazon Prime. And it's this entire I don't want to say industry, but the demand for this product is fed by research that is very, very old. So we're trying to refresh a lot of the scientific literature on it, verify findings, but also figure out how exactly ancient peoples used this plant. The governing sort of hypothesis is that it was infused into wine, but our research is beginning to show that ethanol may not be an effective solvent in this case. So we need to kind of reassess the not only the material production of Blue Lotus products in ancient Egypt, but also the rituals that go along with them. If the material they're using is different, how does that change the way we view ritual in ancient Egypt? So yeah, that's my project.
Thanks, Liam.
Of
Really
course.
interesting, fascinating stuff. And yeah, moving on to Patricia, I think one of the other things that maybe some of these projects, past ones and future ones, will engage with around communities and different ways that psychedelics show up in different cultures and different groups and communities. I wonder if you could tell us about your project.
Thank you, Tony. Hi, everyone. My name is Patricia Kubala. I am a PhD student, also like Liam, in the anthropology department. And my dissertation research is about the intersections of contemporary psychedelic plant medicine practices in the United States and what you could call maybe the ancestral or intergenerational. So in the past, it's a really interesting moment for the study of psychedelics plant medicines in the United States. You know, Hillary was describing with Elastic Magazine, the first issue was on dying. And a lot of the very public research about psychedelics in the past couple of decades has been oriented towards thinking about mystical experience, thinking about ego death as a kind of therapeutic activity. And alongside that, in outside of kind of clinical research spaces, many people have been working with psychedelics and plant medicines to address intergenerational suffering, to revive traditions that were suppressed under settler colonial administrations. These issues are still, of course, ongoing for many Indigenous and BIPOC communities. And so my Flourish fellowship was to organize a conference on these themes. It was entitled Psychedelic Reckonings. And with support from the Flourish Trust and the Townsend Center for the Humanities, this conference explored these intersections between the ancestral, the intergenerational, and psychedelics and plant medicines. And I organized it in collaboration with Juliana Willers. Juliana is a medical anthropologist of Indigenous descent. She's also a mental health counselor and has been involved in advocacy work for crisis care at festivals, psychedelic harm education, and also her work has really been oriented towards bringing attention to inequities in access to psychedelics and the lack of inclusion of Indigenous and BIPOC communities in policymaking and scientific research. So our conference was really oriented. It was a big terrain of themes, again, like seeking to make space for these conversations about the ancestral and the intergenerational, and also, what it is to reckon with kind of legacies of different psychedelic cultures, white psychedelia, the problems of cultural appropriation. This current moment, again, of psychedelic and plant medicine culture in the United States is a very highly contested one. There's a lot of histories, lineages, traditions, sensibilities, differences in terms of what's at stake. And so our conference brought together healers, artists, scholars, practitioners, ethnobotanists to explore these themes.
Tricia, very informative. You touched on something there that I guess I'd like to speak to all of you about, and that's just the community aspect of the work that you're actually doing. If people have found this webinar, they found the website, and so there's a lot of questions and answers around who can apply, and also having different types of contributors to projects and things. So I'm wondering, each of you, if you've had opportunities either to have people who were a part of your application for these projects. You mentioned Juliana, Patricia. Also, have you had opportunities to connect with other fellows or mentors? How has being a part of this program been a community effort, either through your application or in the research that you're doing? And yeah, we can go back to Hillary to start if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah, Elastic has been just a massive community effort in every way. We applied as a team, both for funding from UC Berkeley and Harvard, who has like a parallel program. And it's amazing when this team began to form. I think that one thing that's had such an impact on the project itself is to see that psychedelic art is not this like the extremely niche category that some people might imagine, because like for instance, Darian Longmire, who is an artist and a faculty member at UC Berkeley, who works in the art department, makes this like wonderfully, I think, psychedelic art that is largely influenced by Black techno culture. And when we started looking at Harvard, there's poet Amanda Gunn in the English department who is interested in poetry around ephemerality and Black pleasure, and Laura Vandenberg, who writes these just incredible speculative novels that are very lush, that play with time and space in all kinds of ways. And so you have these two institutions engaging in this endeavor to explore psychedelics in society and culture. And right off the bat, it's easy to find people whose work has clearly been influenced, if not by psychedelic substances themselves, then at least just by the language of psychedelia. I mean, one thing, just as a side note, that we have found throughout this project is that psychedelics, the ubiquity of psychedelics, the fact of psychedelics in society has just had an influence on art and writing at large. And so, many people have written about just the influence of psychedelics on modern art, and the fact of dissolving boundaries between high art and low art, or painting and sculpture, encouraging people to experiment with genre. And so I found people at both institutions who were doing work that was relevant to this, and it's just been amazing to bring everyone together. Since we applied together as a team, the number of people whom we've approached and who have approached us is just, I mean, it's insane. I think there are almost 30 writers in this issue, in this first issue, almost 30 artists in this first issue. So the issue alone will have almost 60 contributors. We've been approached in, the minute that the Elastic email was up and running, the number of messages we got from filmmakers, writers, artists, facilitators of all kinds working with psychedelics. It's incredible what a team effort this has been, and everybody has sort of pitched in various ways. We have designers and other editors, and yeah, it's truly incredible, and it's been really nice to be able to take advantage of BCSP's resources and to be influenced by the work of other fellows. It's been great.
Right. Thanks, Hillary. Liam, I think you came across some expected and maybe some unexpected collaborators in your project. You want to tell us about how
Oh,
that's going?
absolutely. So at first, I actually applied for this project my first semester at UC Berkeley. So I was still kind of a new fish in a very big pond. At that time, I hadn't planned on minoring in Middle Eastern studies. But then I spoke with Beatrice, who's also a fellow. And then I spoke with her thesis advisor, Rita Lucarelli, professor of Egyptology at Berkeley. And that's when I decided, okay, and I really began to talk to them, and I remember Professor Lucarelli said, you should consider minoring in Middle Eastern language and culture and learning about ancient Egypt. So that was my first sort of branching out because of my project, and I was thinking I need to kind of minor in this so I can do the best job I can. And since then, I've taken coursework in hieroglyphics. I do translation work for the Hearst Museum now. And the most sort of unexpected was I bumped into a friend on campus, and her name was Nare, and we actually went to the same elementary school, middle school, high school, community college, and at Berkeley. And I had no idea she was there. And I bumped into her. She's a chemical biology major, and I told her about my project. And at that time, I didn't really know much about chemical analysis. I knew the basic gist of it, but I was under the impression I would just need to collect these samples and send them in and interpret the data. But she said, you should really talk to Professor Evan Williams, who was her professor. So she brought me to Professor Williams, and he said, we'll take you into our lab and allow you to use our equipment and actually train you on the mass spec machine so that you can do these tests yourself. And over the past 5 months, I've been working in the lab of Evan Williams, working with one of his grad students named Veena Avatani. And they've just been amazing. They've been training me how to use the mass spec machines, how to interpret the data myself. I'm just so thankful that they were willing to take me on. And I don't have a background in science, but I was willing to learn. Um, and I think that is why interdisciplinary projects like this are so beautiful, because I don't think I would have ever had the opportunity to do this if it wasn't for this project.
Thank you. Such a great little background on how things are coming together for you. Yeah, and Patricia, moving over to you. You mentioned Juliana and a lot of different types of voices and people you brought together for your summit. What's the collaboration experience been like for you?
Yeah, I want to name two things, just about the conference and the organizing process and so forth. That the knowledge of psychedelics in society and culture is clearly not limited to scholars at universities or university institutions, quite the opposite. And in fact, this grant, Psychedelics in Society and Culture, is one of the few that I know of that in the United States, at least, is actively supporting research at the intersections of psychedelics and the humanities and social sciences. So it's a very special grant. Um, but that said, as I mentioned before, this psychedelic space is a highly contested space. There's a lot of different communities, traditions, lineages that are coming together with very different stakes. And so, for anyone thinking of applying for this grant to organize an event, I just want to clarify that there does have to be a Berkeley collaborator who is the main applicant, so a postdoc, a graduate student, undergraduate student, a faculty member needs to submit, but community collaborations are encouraged. And as all of us have been talking about in different ways, the knowledge and practice of psychedelics and plant medicines is vast. It is interwoven within so many communities and forms of practice. And so it's a really exciting thing to create these kind of collaborations between, institutional spaces like Berkeley and the many, many worlds of knowledge and practices that are flourishing outside of the university. And this is, of course, crucial, for recognizing the many, many decades and ongoing, conditions in which many communities their knowledge is marginalized and is not the center of the conversation. They're not kind of leading the scientific research. They don't have access to the money, to the power, right? These are historically marginalized traditions, even though some of them really are, these are the people, communities, lineages that know the most about these substances. So there's a lot of, issues oriented towards access, equity, and so forth to take into consideration when creating grant projects. The other thing I want to name is that I have been, as a graduate student at UC Berkeley, very, very happy to join the reading group of Pulumi Saha, who is also a Flourish Fellow. Pulumi is a professor of English at UC Berkeley, and her project with the Flourish Trust is to explore the very generative and also tense relationship between critical theory and psychedelics and mysticism, and think about both, the tensions within critical theory and its orientation towards the mystical, skepticism towards it, and also the kind of generative possibilities for critical thinking that may be found in contemporary psychedelic practice. So there's a graduate student and also a faculty reading group, and it's been really productive and generative for my research to be part of this graduate reading group that is supported by the Flourish Trust's Pulumi Saha's grant.
Nice, thank you, Richard. I love how we were able to kind of weave in some of the other fellows that couldn't be here today and to hear a little bit about their projects. And you can find more about those on our website. And you can also check out the Harvard Mahindra Center. They're a partner, as I think Hillary mentioned, in this program. And so you can check out some of the projects from their 2024 fellows if that's helpful to you in your process as well. Next question. I'm just kind of wondering, I mean, we're at the time of this, we're a little over halfway into the program, so there's still some time to go, but kind of a two-part question. What excites you the most about the future of your project and the work that's still to come? And then maybe part two is looking back on how far you've come so far. Is anything you wish you would have known either about your project or this program in general? So this kind of one kind of glance looking forward to the next 6 months of the program, and then perhaps looking back, anything else you might want to share about that learning process. Hillary, would you like to go again?
Sure. I mean, it's going to be a very exciting next few months for us. As we're having this conversation, we're really like heads down on the first issue, and it will go to the printer in the very first days of March. So we're really approaching deadline. Those issues will be out in the world toward the end of March. And then it would just be, I mean, launch event after launch event, running around and trying to get issues into as many hands as possible. And I'm so excited about that. I also just hope that this project, in general, has a very long life. We're already looking toward issue 2, and the possibilities, for that. We need to get it funded, but we hope that it will exist, that it will happen. I would say in general, the most exciting thing about this and moving into the future, I think it will continue to be the case, has just been the response has been truly just outsized for a publication that doesn't exist yet. that has a very limited right now social media presence. Our site is being constructed as I speak, and I have a full inbox every single day. I think that it is just really indicative of the appetite for conversations around psychedelic culture. I mean, as Patricia mentioned, this is such a special program because these conversations in a way are just sort of starting, and there isn't a lot of support in this space. As we all know, the majority of the discussions that are happening related to psychedelics are happening in the context of medicine, of therapy, and just to be able to think about, well, what does psychedelic culture look like in 2025? What is a piece of psychedelic writing? What are the ways in which psychedelic art can manifest is hugely exciting for us, and we're really just hoping that this magazine, that this project will be a conversation starter, that it will push the dialogue forward, because we don't really want to be the gatekeepers who are saying this is what psychedelic art is and this is what it isn't, but rather amassing a community, as we were just talking about, and having those conversations all together. So yeah, so just very, very exciting future ahead. In terms of what I wish I had known, I think that I wouldn't have done anything differently, because this is sort of the way that it had to be. But I will say that applying for a grant of this kind for to set up a project of this scale, literally from zero, is quite something. And I think that, in the future, it will be interesting for us to apply for funding and for support as it relates to like a particular aspect of this. So, to think about, okay, what kind of support do we need for issue 2, which is specifically about this subject? Because right now we're taking this support and stretching it such that it encapsulates, printing, distribution, editorial work, content, you name it, events, design. It's really incredibly multifaceted. And again, this is sort of the way that we had to begin, but I think it will be interesting to zoom in the future, and really seek out, yeah, just more targeted support. But yeah, it's been really wonderful to be able to do it anyway, really.
Thank you. Yeah, Liam, would you like to share some of your insights and casting an eye towards what's next for you?
Sure. Um, so we're last semester we did kind of our preliminary data collection, and this coming semester we're going to finalize everything, make all the graphs look nice and pretty, essentially. But I will say one of the most exciting things is that we're producing more questions than we are answers. Um, and I like your heart rate goes up when you hear the 3 words more research needed. It's like, okay, you know? Um, but I will say, another one of the things that um, I find very exciting about my project is, or one of the things I've learned is that in ancient texts detailing ritual and spells and magic from ancient Egypt can be equally as informative as modern scientific literature. It's a very unique intersection of history and the science that we would associate with like very futuristic things. Um, and then what was the second part of your question?
Yeah, just what you see, what are you excited about for your project kind of moving forward?
Moving forward. Let me think. I mean, I'm very excited that we're planning on expanding the project. We're next semester we're hoping we can perform sampling on some pottery shards at the Hearst Museum. Um, there was actually a recent publication in Nature that was detailing chemical analysis done on pottery residue from ancient Egypt, and they did find psychoactive compounds, and that was the first time that was ever done. So the hypothesis that the ancient Egyptians did use psychoactive drugs is now proven. And it was kind of, I remember Professor Lucarelli emailed me that, and I was like, okay, the ball is beginning to get rolling, and it's great that I have a project doing it right now, and there's increasing interest about this. So I think um I also think there is this weird notion, and I feel like I said this before during a different talk I did, but there's this notion that certain ancient empires that we find ourselves enamored with, like Rome, ancient China, and ancient Egypt, they didn't really use psychedelics. It's this weird bias, this notion. And it also seeps into other things like specifically like homosexuality. Like there's this weird notion, like in ancient Egypt, there's a tomb of these two men that were entombed together, and it was very obvious that they were a couple, but Egyptologists, it's known as the tomb of the two brothers. It's just one of those things where psychedelic research, we're not only trying to discover something new, but we're also combating like years and years and years of bias and all of these notions that have kind of elevated sort of a Western view of psychedelics, where it's not something that productive empires do, but that's absolutely not the case. So it's not only trying to discover something new, but peeling layers and layers of the past back.
Thank you. Thank you for that insight. Yeah, Patricia, over to you. You've pulled off this amazing summit, and wondering, looking back on that and your dissertation in general, what have you kind of think about, and what's kind of moving forward for you?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. So the conference took place last November uh, with, again, support from the Flourish Trust, the Townsend Center for the Humanities. It was held in the Department of Anthropology and the BCSP, and the Center for Interdisciplinary Critical Inquiry also provided a lot of generous support. We, at this point, are working on captioning. Some of the sessions were recorded with permission of the speakers, and so we're working on captioning those videos and hope to be able to share those with the general public as an educational resource about psychedelics in society and culture. So working on that. I am, God willing, finishing my dissertation this year. So I am focused on that, and at some point in the spring, plan to give a lecture about my research, and also I'm in progress organizing another event in collaboration with the Berkeley Olympic, which is a community education center that hosts a monthly psychedelic community meetup called the Chalice. So this is a group that brings together many different worlds of psychedelic practice and history in the Bay Area. And so I'm planning a collaborative event with the Chalice that I hope we'll share soon. And in general, as Liam and Hillary have said, I'm really excited about this developing field, we could say, of psychedelic humanities. And think, as Liam was saying, there's a lot of ways in which prior scholarship has either ignored or buried or misinterpreted what was happening for different communities and time periods and so forth. And so I think it's a really exciting moment to revisit prior scholarship and prior worlds of text and practice. That this current moment of interest opens up for scholars of humanities and social sciences. So it's an exciting moment for, again, this developing field, and also intersecting with these very important critiques of universities and institutions, and the many ways in which certain knowledge systems have been privileged over others. So hopefully it's also a moment to it's hard work, it's not easy work, and I've done quite a bit of conference organizing, and I think for anyone wanting to work in a space where you're bringing together different communities, be prepared for, unfortunately, many instances of microaggressions, of language that is harmful to certain communities. This is part of our world and part of the psychedelic spaces where it's not a question of intent, but of impact. And so it's a crucial thing to work with humility, with understanding that there are often impacts, especially on historically marginalized communities. And the work of repair is essential. And I think, especially again in kind of psychedelic plant medicine worlds, in which there's a lot of very incommensurable or different epistemologies and histories and ways of understanding, even what these substances, materials are, what their names are, right? How to work with them or be with them. So humility and an orientation towards learning, listening, and repair are crucial.
Thanks, Patricia. I really appreciate those thoughts and those reflections from all of you. And yeah, you mentioned the Center for Interdisciplinary Critical Inquiry is another partner on the UC Berkeley campus of this program, along with the Mahindra Center at Harvard. And we talked a little bit about, the interdisciplinary nature and, the upside of that and some of the challenges because of the field where it is, where it's been going and kind of bringing all these disparate voices together. So just kind of naming that. Just one final question, I guess, for each of you, looking back and kind of looking forward. Is there any advice that you might give to potential applicants? I know we've touched on some things throughout the talk, but anything specific that you would advise someone considering to apply for the next cohort? And anything else that you would like to share with the people viewing this video, either about your projects, about what's next? Some of you shared some things that are going on with some events, some future events, but also an opportunity for you to speak to anything else. Hillary.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I would just say to people who are considering applying to the program that they should allow themselves to sort of think outside the box and to think big. When we first started looking into psychedelics in society and culture, we were like, okay, is this maybe, is this oriented particularly toward research? This is not a research project. This is an indie print mag that might be available in a bookstore near you. Is this something that a program of this type could support? And in the end, the answer was yes. And I'm so thrilled that we went for it. I'm thrilled also, we, as I was describing previously, we're a team. Some of the people on the team are at UC Berkeley. Some of the people on the team are at Harvard. Some of the people on the team are from neither institution. And we wondered what that would be like. And it's like, there has been an openness all along, in the face of this project that is big, that is maybe unconventional. And so I've loved that. And I know our entire team has been really grateful for that. And so I would just say to applicants, if you are thinking about a film festival, or if you're thinking about, whatever, if you're thinking about some sort of cultural inquiry that's going to live in the world that may or may not be a research paper, to explore this avenue, because I think that this program really is just interested in all the various ways in which psychedelics are impacting society and culture, and that's an inside and outside of academia. Yeah, I mean, other than that, I would also say that we have been talking a lot about the interdisciplinary aspect of this, and I think that that's been really important to all of us on this call. And I would say, just the ways in which it has been possible for this project in particular to bring people in from different disciplines has been truly incredible. Just this morning, I've been contacted by a lot of people who, because this first issue is the dying issue, for example, I've been contacted by a lot of people who are working with psychedelics in with patients at the end of their lives. And you might not think, what does a magazine that's running psychedelic poetry have to say to somebody who's working with ketamine and end of life questions. But actually, those conversations have been incredibly fruitful. And, I just received a transcript some days ago from someone who was at the end of their life. And we're thinking about pulling a line from that transcript and having an artist illustrate that sort of image that came to their mind as they were contemplating the end of their lives. And so these have just been really, really fruitful conversations. And I would just encourage applicants to involve people from different domains and see what happens. In terms of anything I want to sort of pump up, I would just encourage anyone watching to go to www.elasticmag.com. You can sign up for updates there. We'll be having a launch event in the Bay Area in April, a launch event in New York in May, and the magazine will be available for pre-order at the very latest at the start of next month. And so I hope to get as many of these into as many hands as I possibly can. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Can't wait to get a copy. Leon, any advice you give to prospective applicants or anything else you'd like to share about what your experience has been?
Absolutely. I will say the biggest piece of advice I have is be prepared to problem solve and get creative. Psychedelics research, especially in terms of scientific methodology, is very new. And while that is very exciting, at the same time, there is no well-beaten path when it comes to this stuff. Science is the tool, but there is no manual at this point. You have to get creative. And I think at the same time, it's important to understand that at times we're not just researchers, we're also storytellers. I don't like calling myself a researcher for that reason because I don't feel as if I'm discovering anything new. I just feel as if I'm uncovering something that had been lost or intentionally suppressed. Um, so I think that when you view it like that, it makes academic research seem less intimidating. That um, research is storytelling. It's scientifically ordained storytelling. And I also think there is this notion in not only in anthropology, but in any work that deals with culture, that your own interests are bias. But I disagree with that. I think your own interest is what gives you passion. Um, and I think, especially in anthropology now, we're at a time where people are beginning to realize that. People are beginning to study things that they are deeply passionate about. And debatably, they have their own internal story they want to tell. And science can be the tool that you use to do that and share that with the world. So I would say if you want to do research, view it as storytelling, but also be prepared to problem solve because this is very new and exciting territory.
Thanks, Liam. Patricia, over to you.
Yeah, I will say, the application website is really stresses this, but I will stress it as well that if you are applying to organize an event, just be aware that there is limited kind of infrastructural support on the part of the Psychedelics and Society and Culture program that to make sure that you check in with your department, your Berkeley faculty, grad student, undergrad, that the department has the capacity to support the organizing process. Just the kind of bureaucratic necessities of how grants work at universities, and to do the research, to budget. Often, it's hard to book rooms at Berkeley. They're often quite expensive for conference venues. And so to kind of do that sort of research for the budget, to check in with your department, budget for assistance if you're going to need it, to create promotional materials, to hire a transcriber, to if you're planning to record and then share the recordings, to hire a videographer, someone who can record, to hire someone who can caption, all these kinds of infrastructural activities take time, they take money. And so would definitely encourage assembling a strong organizing team and planning for these kinds of infrastructural necessities alongside, the wonderful kind of intellectual and the sort of passion that goes into all of these projects, as Liam was saying. So I would recommend keeping that in mind, and also checking in perhaps with the program before you apply. There are certain things the grant does not cover. There's quite a few things actually. It doesn't cover tuition. It doesn't cover sort of blanket kind of stipends for organizational support. Each item has to be accounted for, and so I would recommend just checking in to make sure that your budget items are actually items that can be activities that can be covered by the grant itself.
Just want to say you all are amazing. I really appreciate your time, your passion to the work, just the knowledge and the wisdom and the advice that you've shared with everybody. Yeah, so much gratitude, and can't wait to see what all of you are working on next. And we'll close it there, just to say that the applications are open on the Berkeley website, which is psychedelics.berkeley.edu. But the chances are, if you're watching this video, you've already found the website. Those applications are open until March 3rd. You can have a look at, we've got a pretty long FAQ section that try to answer some of the questions that some of our panelists today have been pointing out around the admin piece of things. But you can also reach out to the BCSP if you have any further questions. If you're even considering thinking about applying, I'd say go for it, apply. This is a different type of program that doesn't exist out there in a lot of different situations, and we'd be very excited to kind of read your application. So thank you for your time, and thank you for the panelists, and good luck.